For the presentation to our first speaker. Gary Zimmerman is with Newstar. Following him will be Brian Jarutka of ComScore, and then we'll have a short roundtable. So please give a warm welcome to Gary Zimmerman. All right.
Well, first of all, thanks for being with me this morning. It's really important to continue to talk about what the notion of big data and analytics are, right? So, and I think the way to kind of take a look at this is the way that I kind of made my way here today, right? I started out in Washington, D.C., that's where we're based, and took a flight over here. So you have to go to the airport a couple hours early. You have to sit around and try and think about what to do. And at one time, as you can tell by the gray hair, I've been around a while. At one time, what you'd do is you'd read a book, or you'd read a newspaper, or you'd walk around, or anything like that. And I have an iPad with me, so I spent all that time basically online, either connecting to business or connecting to personal things like books or music, or trying to download movies or whatever it was I was trying to do. I was connected all the time. And when I was sitting up here earlier today, I was looking at the crowd here, and the same thing is happening, right? So when there's not something that's interesting that's going on, you're actually looking at something that you're connected to, whether it's your email or it's your social networking or whatever you're doing. And the whole idea behind this is that we are just basically all connected all the time. It's a phenomenon that's happened mostly because of mobile devices. People have the ability to take, in essence, their entire life with them on a mobile device. And they're becoming more and more ubiquitous, right? So 322 million cell phones in the United States, half of which are smartphones now. So they've got as much a data plan on them as they do a voice plan. 22 million tablets, mostly iPads. 82 million broadband connections to the home or to the office. These are generating, as you saw in some of those earlier graphics, a ton of information. Zettabytes a month of information. We don't even know how to count that high. That's how much information is being generated, right? And it's generated through a number of different ways. People are creating their own information. People are curating information across the internet. People are sharing information. These are all different ways that folks use your networks to conduct their daily business and to run their daily lives and stay connected. So one of the issues that's starting to pop up, and I'm sure that many of you are aware of this, is that as we move to more of an IP-centric world, things like voice and text messaging that used to be the domain of the carriers is now moving over the top. There is no reason in the world that someone can't speak to somebody on a voice connection or send an instant message to somebody through any of the applications that are available over the top on the devices anymore. So there's an intrusion into your current market. And you need to kind of think about how you differentiate against that. And I think you differentiate with your strengths. One of the strengths that you have is that you have a trusted relationship with your customers. And the reason I say that is that if you get on the internet and you try and use some new service, you don't really know who's on the other end of that. And if it doesn't work, there's no one to call. So there's a trust factor that's built into that. People have gotten used to the fact that folks in the communication services industries actually can be trusted to hold their data. There's the issue of quality of service. The internet stuff, although it's getting better, is still, just good enough, right? Your abilities to manage that service and shape that service to meet the customer's needs is something that the internet guys can't do yet. And finally, there's the notion of value. As we start to think about the kinds of services that you provide and the kinds of insights that you can provide to your customers, you can actually start to get them to pay attention to you in terms of a deep customer relationship. And that deep customer relationship has a lot of value, not only to you, but quite honestly to other businesses that would be willing to understand how your customer behaves and the kinds of things that your customer is interested in. So let's talk a little bit about some of the dynamics in the market that are happening today. So what do internet companies offer, the over-the-top guys? They offer personalized services. Now, they're kind of creepy how they get that information to make it personalized. I don't know if you've been on Google and you search for a few things and all of a sudden you start to see ads popping up for those things. But people appreciate the fact that there's personalized service. They have global delivery. It means you can get, as long as you've got a browser, you can get to that stuff pretty much anywhere. But they have a best effort experience. If it doesn't work, you just go away and you try again. There's no one to call. If you're frustrated with the service or you don't like it, you have to go find another application because they're just not going to fix it. And then the biggest issue with them is privacy, trust issues. Anything that you give to one of the over-the-top guys is their property. The information that you give to a Google or to a Facebook, if you look at the privacy statements, is their property. So you're giving away your personal identity to those guys. So what do you have? You provide a high-quality experience, including support, including troubleshooting. When it doesn't work, they have someone to call. You have trust. People trust you with the information that you're giving, NSA aside. You're trusted. You offer package service bundles. So it's much less personalized because you're offering, yes, you're offering bundles of all-you-can-eat minutes or messages or whatever, but there's not a notion of I can select one or two of these things and three or four of those things and make up a plan that makes sense for me. Oops, that's not mine. So, okay. And typically your services are driven by, where your network is. So if someone goes outside of your network, then you have some problems trying to match that service. Yes, there's roaming and other things that can help with the basic services, but if you're trying to offer anything enhanced, it becomes an issue. And then what do customers really want? They want the best of both. They want anytime, anywhere, any device access to their content. They want personalized services. They want the best quality, and they want simplified trust. They want to know whoever they go to is going to manage their affairs for them most effectively. And quite honestly, this is a place where we at Neustar believe that the communication service providers have a leg up because you already have a basis of trust. And so it's just working through some of the other issues around the whole notion of personalized services and some of the other things that are going to actually deepen the relationship you have with your customers. So what is your big data advantage? And when I talk about big data, I'm not talking about the unstructured, text stuff or things that are laying, around inside of the social networking sites. I'm talking about the kind of stuff that you can actually look at, analyze, and create some notion of how you take action against. And most of that information is flowing through your networks already. It's high volume. To the most part, it's structured. It has headers to it, so you can figure out a lot of information about it. It's coming off of cell sites, so you know where it's coming from. It can be organized. It can be personally identifiable. It's coming out of the network, so you can tell some of the things about how someone's connected. You can tell what kind of device someone is on, so you can see that they're on a BlackBerry versus an iPad, and you can adjust what you're doing based on that. You can understand destinations, both where your customers and where they're trying to communicate to. And most of all, you understand their usage patterns. You can tell when someone's on, what they're doing, and when they're doing it. All of those things become very interesting in both sorting your services as well as sorting the services that other businesses might want to buy from you. So let's take a look at what you have. You have historical usage on all the different services that flow across your network for all of your customers. You actually have information about when they're being used, how they're being used, and in essence, all of the summary information associated with those particular telephone numbers or IP addresses or whatever you're keeping track of. You also have access to real-time data. So you can do things like pull identifiers for particular devices, pull locations for particular users, things that cannot be made available through any other way. So there's clearly unique data. If you work with somebody that can help you understand that data outside of your own four walls, you can augment that data by adding things like demographics information and behavioral-based data, like where they buy, what kind of media they consume. And this can create an extremely powerful customer information asset for you. So you could basically tell from your customer base not only how they use your network, but you can also start to predict where you can find other people that look like those people. You can also predict what services might appeal to those people. You can also predict a number of different things that other businesses might find interesting, right? So the way to think about this is that if you provide authoritative information that includes somebody's habits, includes information about what devices that they're on, that increases the surety of whatever action that other company is trying to get to happen, whether it's an advertisement, whether it's a conversion, whether it's understanding the market so that they can be better prepared to go to market on their new products. There is real value in the information that you have, but you have to think about how you give that information up. Because you are trusted, and you have rules about what information you can give away, what information you get to keep. Not true with the internet guys. But you can handle that by making it more anonymized, right? You can make it so that you protect the privacy of your consumers. And you do that by creating some kind of a view of this stuff, again, that's anonymized. So you can never figure out who exactly is at the other end of this, but you can point out the groupings of those people and how they might behave in a similar way. As I mentioned earlier, you have very unique data. So on a transaction-by-transaction basis, you can do things like if someone is actually trying to process a credit payment using your mobile device, right? You can verify that the mobile device is actually the mobile device, that the SIM card and the equipment information matches up with the telephone number. You can actually say this telephone is here in Las Vegas, but the transaction is happening over in New York, so maybe this isn't the right person, right? So there's some very unique information that you have that could really drive value for someone who's trying to take risk out of a credit card transaction, for instance, right? And that information is very valuable because of that. So if you can reduce the risk in someone's marketing efforts, because they're not guessing as much anymore, if you can reduce the risk in their business efforts because they know that they're speaking with the right person or that the transaction is coming from the authoritative source, there's real money in that. Charlotte Patrick from Gartner recently published a report that outlined about 45 different ways that a CSP can leverage the information that's coming out of their own internal systems to actually drive their business more effectively. And she actually quantified each one of those and said that if you did them all, it could create a 3% improvement in your profitability. Some of those will raise revenue, some of those will reduce costs, but 3% is not anything to really sneeze at. So one of the first things that she noticed was that if you had the right kind of information, you knew what your customers were like, you could figure out based on some of the demographics work that I talked about earlier, where more of them are most likely to be, you could actually create more effective campaigns. Better messaging delivered in the ways that your customers and prospects like to have that information delivered will create better marketing campaigns, better conversion rates. The same thing is true in customer service, right? One of the things that we always say is that once you kind of build this customer behavior asset, once you really understand who your customers are, you need to apply that at every touch point that you have with that customer. So when they call into a call center or they hit your website, you should know who they are. You should know what kind of services they have. You should know what kind of services they might be susceptible for, right? Those are kind of things that will drive a deeper relationship. They'll also, by the way, increase your revenues. We've seen customers use that quite a bit, especially when they're calling in or they're coming in from a source that you don't know. So for instance, you know their mobile device. What if they call you from their home phone? Okay. How do you connect that up to the person that you're providing service to? You have to figure out a way to do that, because that connection will actually drive a deeper relationship with your customer. Rather than saying, "Hi, who are you? Can you tell me what your phone number is?" If you already know that, that's really kind of an interesting thing for your customers. Product management, and I'll kind of share a simple example of how product management might be able to use this. But in essence, if you know what your customers like, and you know what the interests are outside of your four walls, you can actually make some better product management decisions about what kind of new services that you want to offer into the marketplace. Retention. Again, I mentioned that there's lots of folks out there that are trying to take away your customers. Well, if you could use that customer information to basically predict early on that someone's susceptible to churn because their usage patterns have changed, and you've seen those changes before, just before someone has come off the network, and you know enough about them that you can understand what their interests are, perhaps you can be more proactive in retaining that customer by, in essence, providing offers to them that keep them on your network. Right? So whether that's new plans that you have or something as simple as a Starbucks card that says, "Thanks for being my customer," it may work, but you won't know that if you don't understand who's susceptible to churn. It can also help with the network experience. Now, you'll hear more about this in terms of thinking about how you optimize your network this afternoon. That's not what I'm really kind of talking about. I'm really talking about this customer behavior impacting the policies in your network, allowing you to offer new and differentiated services based on the fact that you know who's actually trying to get at that stuff and what they're trying to get at. So for instance, you can work into some notion of active policy management so that you could offer someone, "Look, I understand that you're trying to download a movie. You can download it at HD and it's going to cost you this much money. Or if you want to wait for a while, I'll download it to your device during the off hours, and it'll be ready for you, sometime this evening. Which do you think would be better for you?" And the customer could actually choose those kinds of things, right? That kind of dynamic policy where the customer's involved will drive a very deep relationship. And finally, making sure that the customers are getting the right offers, the things that they're interested in, the things that are most likely going to help them convert, is all based on customer experience, all based on the information that you know about your customers and the information that you can get from third parties that can help you kind of round out that view of the customer. So instead of sending off offers, and I always use this example, college kids come to the website, and they're seeing the same thing that middle-aged people with 14 kids are looking at when they look at your website, right? Well, the one that is interested in, the college kid is interested in some kind of a prepaid, cheap as they can get, smart device because they want to stay connected, right? The middle-ager with 14 kids is interested in a family plan. So why wouldn't you, based on the information that you know, serve up different offers to those people, right? You have the ability to do that. And those are some of the things that will drive the customer experience the way you want. So I'm going to go into a little quick view of of how you might use this to kind of determine whether you want to expand your product portfolio or not. We do have space in the exhibit hall where people that actually know how this works could talk to you about it if you'd like. But I just want to kind of share with you how this kind of could work, right? So one of the very first things you need to do is take that customer behavior data and figure out some way to group it so that it makes sense to you and your organization, right? Now typically these groupings, are unique to your customer base, but they can be organized in a way that you can kind of take a look at them, right? And so you can't really read this, but there are groupings that are at the bottom of this that basically say, based on what I'm seeing in the customer base and based on this criteria of what determines is the best customer for me, I can group the kinds of folks that are using my systems and my networks into, in this case, 10 basic groupings, right? And those groupings have distinct personalities. Those groupings have distinct attributes. That creates a common language that you can use across your entire customer touchpoint and experience. And so in this particular case, the groups are called G1, affluent tech families, G2, affluent big city couples, G3, mature power couples. I can go on down the list, but the idea is that you actually can start to understand the groupings of these customers, right? And based on a particular telephone number, you can kind of figure out who's on the other end of that through these groupings, right? You can also figure out where more of those folks are. So if you're moving into a new area or you want to do some targeted advertising, you can do that because you now know the profile of your best customers. So let's say that you were going to start offering video content as part of your services. You're moving beyond, again, this is a kind of a hypothetical, you're moving beyond basic voice and text messaging into video streaming, right? So you kind of have to find out who would be interested in this offer, right? So you need to describe the streaming video households, and you use that doing demographics, attitudes, and some of the behavior information that's coming out of your network. Then you want to find out where they are. You want to find out areas where there are high and low concentration of those folks. And if you can do that the right way, you can influence what's going on with product. You can influence what's going on with marketing, and you can get a better idea of where you might have to deploy network resources. So I took those original groups that we had up there and basically ran some queries that basically said, who has been watching streaming video in the last week or so? Okay. And although this again is a real eye chart, it starts to point out some very interesting information. So the group that's most likely to stream video isn't one of the ones that are in part of my core. They're actually one of the ones that is a group that I want to penetrate because they're not taking my services today. That's interesting. Okay. They are a little over 2 times more likely to consume a video service than the average. Their average income is about $88,000. They're about 40. Most of them don't have a lot of children. Most of them rent, but they're near the city core, right? So they're closer to downtown than they are to the suburbs. And I can go down this list and see all the different ones that are there and how they would impact this. But in essence, what you're trying to do is say, at a particular point in time, in this particular case around segment G3, you really don't want to mark it down below that because they're the ones that are most likely not going to take video service from you, right? But the ones above might. Okay. So you can start making some marketing decisions. Start making some sizing decisions based on how many people you think are going to take this from your current area. So this was a nationwide service that can be done on a regional basis as well, but it basically points out that, look, where the major metropolitan areas are, that's where most of these people are concentrated, okay? That's not news. It only becomes news when you start to break it down. So if you look at the Los Angeles area, you can see in the darker spaces here that more of those people are concentrated in particular areas around Los Angeles. Right? I could have picked Vegas, I probably should have, but I picked Los Angeles. Okay. And these are the zip codes where those people live. So if you're doing direct mail campaigns, this is where you'd want to concentrate those direct mail campaigns, because this is where they live. Okay. And finally, this is some of the demographics and propensity information that can help you understand the market. So those top level folks that I showed you there, again, they're under age 44. They're more likely Hispanic. They live in those urban areas. They have a higher household income. They're liberals. They expect to change jobs fairly quickly. And they want to get to the very top of their career. But they also visit entertainment news sites. They're heavy internet users, so they're heavy bandwidth users. They visit Turner Digital. They bought a DVD at Target. They use cell phones for games. They watch Chelsea Lately. They enjoy eating foreign foods and reading Cosmopolitan, so most likely they're women. Using this kind of information really starts to hone in on these people and the kinds of things that you might want to offer to them and how you might be able to reach them. So you wouldn't put an advertisement in Mechanics Daily if they read Cosmopolitan. You'd put it in magazines that are adjacent to that, because that's how you're going to reach them. You'd reach them at shows that are around Chelsea Lately, because that's where they are. Again, using this information that you have can drive not only your product and your marketing efforts and your networking efforts, but there are people that are willing to pay for this information because they have products they want to sell to these same groups. So, 3 thoughts to conclude. Take advantage of your strengths. You have more information that is useful because it's authoritative information than most people realize. Counter your weaknesses. Use that information to drive custom offers, to deepen the customer relationship that you have. And if you do that, you'll see financial improvements. So, in closing, we talk about the fact that anybody can spot a wrong answer. The problem is figuring out how to spot the wrong questions. I think one of the things that's going to be a challenge for most of the folks that are here is that the information that I'm talking about is coming from a bunch of different places inside of your network, inside of your billing systems, inside of your operating systems. And the challenge is figuring out how to pull out all that together in a way that makes sense of it, that creates that customer behavior asset. So with that, I thank you for listening to me, and I'd like to see if there are any questions. Please. Sure.
So I guess you mentioned household level targeting. Is it available at the individual level as well?
The issue with individual level targeting is because the problem is you can't grab some of that propensity stuff at the individual level. You can capture the behavior, right? But to tie it back to income and things like that, you have to kind of do that at the household level because it's just not captured at the individual level. But clearly you will want to capture as much as you can in terms of behavior at the individual level, right? Okay.
I'm just trying to rank the issue of, legal issue, basically anonymizing the data, protecting user privacy, and at the same time personalize the service. So if you anonymize it, how can you address the personalization?
Well, you have to, there's a couple of things, right?
Can I repeat the question?
Okay. The question is there's a dichotomy between abstracting the information or anonymizing the information and offering personalized service, right? And I think the issue that the way to handle that is through these definitions of customers, right? So if you put that person in a group that has like behaviors, you can market to that group without violating the privacy of the particular individual, right? So that's how you kind of do that, is you take your individual data and you aggregate it into these groups so that you can look at them as a buying segment, right? And that's how you can make better offers to them. Now, I picked a random 10 segments here, but you could segment this down, fairly granularly.
Could there be any issues with profiling? Because obviously you're profiling customer groups and this buys into stereotyping. Could there be an issue?
There's always the issue around analytics where if you take information from someone and use it without their permission, that you could create some kind of a weirdness, right? And that's why, most of what the best practices in the industry is to ask first, right? So, and that's
It's done anyways, right? It's not regulated.
in the internet world, absolutely, that's true. That's true, and that's why those usage agreements, those privacy agreements that you sign that basically say your data is their data, is probably not the best way to go at this, right?
I'm concerned about the stereotyping that this could bring in long-term macroeconomic picture. And say, this user group is like this because we have the truth. And maybe they might just turn around and say, well, I didn't want that to be known.
And again, a lot of this stuff is guesswork, right? And you're creating precision against the guesswork, right? If you look at it this way, if you advertise in the Super Bowl, you're going to get 1 billion hits, right? Now, how many of those people are actually going to buy what you're selling? Not many, right? But if you look at some of the stuff that we're talking about here, if you get them down to a segment, in this particular case, we were showing the first segment up there were about 4 million households in it, and their propensity to buy a video service was about 2 and change more than the average, right? Now, that's still guesswork, right? You're just better at guessing because you kind of know where these households are, you know that they're more likely to buy, but that doesn't mean you as an individual would be the one that's going to pick up that video service, right? As far as stereotyping or that kind of stuff, I think a lot of that comes from the assumptions that are built around the data. There was a great example of that. I don't know if you've heard it before, but Target was in the news because their data analysts were analyzing buying behavior data that were coming out of the stores. And they got to the point where they were starting to predict when a woman was going to be pregnant and started offering things up before that was actually known. And it created some problems for them, right? There's always going to be the notion that the assumptions that are built on top of the data could create unintended consequences. But by and large, if you're offering, like I mentioned, if you're offering prepaid service to a college student as opposed to a family plan, that's not something that's going to be considered profiling, right? So, okay. Any other questions? Yes.
A question, when you mentioned that advantage of carriers is trust with their customers, is that based on any survey data? Because I have heard in the past that it's actually kind of tough to compete against companies like Google who have established brands with that services, they're giving services for free. There are no customers, don't have history of problem of being overbilled. Is it a fact that customers trust us wireless carriers more than they trust these major internet brands?
We've done some studies on the issue of who folks trust. They tend to trust folks that they have a recurring relationship with, right? So, yes, do I use Gmail? Of course I use Gmail, right? Because it's ubiquitous, it's easy to get to, and that kind of stuff, right? Am I worried about the fact that Google goes through my Gmail and figures out what kind of things I might be interested in? Yeah, I'm also worried about that. If I had an alternative that was something that could give me more assurance that they weren't looking at all of the things that were happening in there, I probably would take it. All right. And I think that's probably the difference, is that, yes, the freemium services that are out there, the public tends to not be aware of the fact that they're actually the product that's for sale, right? It's the information that you either enter in or that you've provided to get that service that's actually being monetized. I say that that carriers or CSPs tend to be more trusted because you do have a relationship. If you do notice that something's going awry, you have somebody to complain to. And quite honestly, the customer has some rights associated with CP&I that aren't available in the internet world, right? So there's some regulation that sits behind this too that says you have an obligation to protect certain parts of their information, right? That doesn't mean that, you know, just because they trust you doesn't mean that they like you. You know, that if you mess up on their billing or you know, you drop calls or something else, that they're not going to go look for somebody else. But if you have a cordial relationship with your customer, they're more likely to trust you with their information than they are Google. So, is that helpful?
I have a question for you.
Yes.
You spoke about people who are willing to pay for the mobile information or the information generated from a mobile period.
Right.
How often do you see that now? Do you see that today a lot of external companies buying information in aggregate, or is that something that hasn't happened, or is it here?
I'll answer that question in two parts, right? There have been studies, and some of our conversations with retailers and other merchants that have suggested that real, valid information is worth a lot of money. You know, I've run Privacy Fix on myself, and I'm worth about $80 to Google because of all the different things I do with them, right? There was a study that was recently published out of the UK that said that you know, consumer companies are willing to pay as much as $125 for valid information, valid, real-time information. And so, yes, there's a real need for it. But there is a problem, right? And the problem is those retailers don't want to go to 100 and contract with 100 different companies to get that. They want to contract with someone that's an information broker that delivers that information to them in a consistent way. Okay, so there are really kind of two pieces to that model. Why is valid information so valuable? If you look at anybody who has any kind of a smart device or an iPad or any other kind of tablet that's out there, you know, underneath the covers, they're engaged with about 80 or so different applications, all of which have asked for things like user IDs and passwords. Some have asked for credit card information. Some have bill to, ship to information. And it's been replicated all across all of these different places, right? But you know, my iTunes ID is an email address I had from 10 years ago, right? So it really is not even connected up to a service anymore. It just happens to be the ID that they used. And that notion of data that's out there and data that's decaying is what's causing the real problem, because you can't trust the information that's coming from a bunch of different sources because it's up to the consumer to kind of keep that up. If it's coming from a trusted source, it's worth a lot more money because then you know that information you can make decisions on, right? So that's really what's driving that.
More questions?
Risk reward, 3% profitability increase, so that's the reward, 3% by investing heavily into the analytics. And the other side, what are some of the risks?
Well, some of the risk would be if you handled it poorly and it tarnished your brand because, you know, people were, you know, just like they got mad at Google and Facebook when they find out what they're doing, right? So if you maintain consent-based, if you make sure that people are aware that their information is not, you know, given out individually, I think that you can avoid some of that. but if you don't do it right, then you fall into the same category as the other guys who make money off of their customers by selling their information. Right? So, okay.
All right, Gary, thanks.
Well, thank you.
Have a